So today I want to talk a little bit about independence. And obviously as a country, it's something that we're really big on. Is being independent and being a land of the free. And now the way that this comes into the federal government is, I just want to point out first that when the federal government was set up, and I'm talking about the federal government, not state governments or any of your local branches of government, but the federal government, they had 5 things that they were to focus on. That was to mint money, to regulate interstate commerce, to make treaties and conduct other foreign affairs, to provide an army and a navy, and also to make the required laws to support the above mentioned. And so in these things, we had the federal government then had those things to worry about, and that was it. Everything else was on a state level, and that was how the country worked. A lot more of the things that we were dealing with was on a state level. It was a people-to-people level. And so how does independence really factor into this is how much these things have kind of grown and multiplied to be so many more things. And the problem with that is that on a state and local level, we understand better the needs of the people in that area. For example, the healthcare in Florida is going to be much different because you have a lot of the snowbirds that come in, the elderly people who enjoy the milder climate, and so they're there a lot more often. You see a lot more older people there, and so you have to have different, things that fit their needs when it comes to healthcare and other disability benefits. That is so important for them, but it's not going to be as important as, say, Chicago, Illinois, because you've got a bigger melting pot of people. It's a city, it runs differently, it pulls different people, and so you've got different needs in different places. One of the biggest things about America is that you're supposed to be able to change your situation and to be free to move about the country. And so the problem with having the federal government to be in charge of things like healthcare and to be in charge of things like education, you have problems there just simply with blanket statements, one-sided formulas. Not everyone's going to fit underneath that blanket. Not everyone's going to be able to fit into that formula and for it to work for them. So we become a little too dependent on our federal government when they start handing these things to us. And at first it may sound great, and you can see that they're trying to do well by these things, but you end up with adverse effects. So just think of things like your police force or your BMV was all ran by the federal government, which means all the ages for driving, different traffic laws, they would all be the same. And in some respects, people applaud that kind of way of thinking. If everything's the same, then it's so much better. And that's what they lean towards. But really, it's an individual thing. Each state can decide what should their speed limits be based on their roads. What ages should children be able to learn to drive? Or I guess in this case, teenagers. When should they be permitted? Do they have to take driver's ed or not? These are things the state and local governments need to be focusing on. It's their people, and the people in these states and a part of these local governments should be able to make their own choices when coming into these things, like how their schools are run, what kind of schools they have. I mean, are you going to have charter schools? Are you going to go year-round? There's so many different choices that you have, and based on the different area, different things are going to be better for these communities. And so that's why it's a little frightening when the federal government tries to come around and kind of smooth everything over and make everything kind of the same, because we need that difference, because we are independent. We need to be making our choices for our local governments, our states, what we want, and to have more of a say into that than kind of having this Papa Bear mentality where they're just going to kind of take over, when really by state you can change your situation. If you like the way that Montana does things versus Virginia, move to Montana. You have that ability as an American citizen, and you should always be protecting your rights to be able to make decisions for yourself outside of those 5 things, which again are to mint money, regulate interstate commerce, which is the different commerce between states. And so just to cover that real quickly, when the U.S. was beginning, there was a lot of problems between the states, and they didn't really want to play fair all the time. And so that was what the federal government was for, is to be able to look over those things. So interstate commerce, things between the states, commerce is trade, money, taxes, etc. And so you've got that going for them. They can make treaties. They conduct a lot of the foreign affair. They provide the Army and the Navy, and they make the required laws to be able to uphold those things. And so outside of those things, your things like the police force, your BMV, your health care, having that not even maybe be a state thing, but also supporting the private sector as citizens, and also your education, how your kids go to school and how you personally go to school, how you're, who's taxed for what. Those are things that you can make a decision as a community and be more educated for what fits your life.